There's a powder that costs less than $2 per application at any hardware store. When dissolved in warm water, it releases the same chemical hospitals use to sterilize operating rooms. It kills black mold at the root, penetrating porous materials bleach cannot reach. It oxidizes every mold spore it touches and leaves behind an alkaline barrier where mold cannot regrow for months, sometimes years. No containment tent, no hazmat suit, no industrial air scrubber, and no $7,000 invoice for a remediation crew using the same chemistry. For most of the 20th century, this is how Americans handled mold. They bought a box of oxygen bleach, mixed a scoop in water, wiped the surface, and moved on. Total cost, under $1. Total time, 20 minutes. Professional intervention, 0. Then, in the late 1990s, everything changed. A household nuisance became a national emergency. Media panic built an entire industry almost overnight. A homeowner who understands the chemistry never picks up the phone, and that cannot be allowed. This is the story of the $2 powder the mold remediation industry hoped you'd never find. Now, go back to 1818, Paris. A young chemist named Louis-Jacques Thénard is working in a laboratory at the Collège de France. He mixes barium peroxide with nitric acid in a glass vessel. The reaction produces a clear liquid that bubbles violently on contact with organic material. He drips it onto cloth. The stain dissolves. On rotting fruit, decay stops. He calls it eau oxygénée, oxygenated water. The world would eventually know it as hydrogen peroxide. What Thénard discovered was one of the most powerful oxidizers in nature. When it contacts organic matter, including fungal cells, it ruptures cell membranes through oxidative lysis. The peroxide molecule donates an oxygen radical that tears through the lipid bilayer of any biological cell it touches. The organism does not slowly weaken. It structurally disintegrates. By the 1890s, hydrogen peroxide was manufactured commercially across Europe and North America. Surgeons used it to sterilize wounds. Water treatment plants used it to kill pathogens. Textile mills used it to bleach fabric without chlorine. In 1899, Sebastian Molinari discovered that combining hydrogen peroxide with soda ash produced a stable crystalline powder, sodium percarbonate. It could be stored dry indefinitely and released fresh hydrogen peroxide on demand. This became the foundation of every powdered oxygen bleach product sold worldwide for the next century. Homemakers in the early 1900s used sodium percarbonate-based cleaners for laundry, kitchen grease, tile grout, and, importantly, mold. When a basement wall grew mold after spring rains, they mixed a scoop in water, wiped it down, and the mold was gone. No professionals, no four-figure invoices. Then, in the early 1990s, everything changed, but not the mold. What changed was the story told about it. In 1993, a cluster of infant pulmonary hemorrhage cases appeared in Cleveland, Ohio. 10 babies in a water-damaged housing project developed bleeding in their lungs. Investigators from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found high concentrations of Stachybotrys chartarum on damp walls. The CDC published a preliminary report suggesting a possible link between mold exposure and the illness. The media detonated. Toxic mold. 2 words that generated immense wealth for a single industry. By 2001, toxic mold graced Time magazine's cover. Lawsuits followed. Ed McMahon sued his insurance company for $20 million, claiming mold in his mansion killed his dog and harmed his health. Melinda Ballard won a $42 million verdict in Texas over mold in her 22-room mansion. The verdict was later reduced, but the damage to public perception was permanent. America was terrified. Here's what the media left out. In 2004, the CDC formally revised its position on the Cleveland study, acknowledging significant shortcomings and noting that a causal link between Stachybotrys and the infant illness was not established. Multiple peer-reviewed papers later confirmed that mold exposure can aggravate allergies and asthma, but the acute lethal narrative of toxic mold was overstated. By then, it didn't matter. An industry had been born. In-mold remediation companies multiplied nationwide. State licensing requirements appeared, certification programs launched. The Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification published standard S520 for professional mold remediation, creating a credential barrier that positioned mold removal as specialist-only work. Insurance companies began covering remediation claims, meaning remediators could charge almost anything because someone else was paying. Stay with me because the money trail gets ugly, but first, the science. Sodium percarbonate is a white granular powder with the chemical formula 2Na2CO3 3H2O2. Dissolved in warm water, it breaks into sodium carbonate, soda ash, and hydrogen peroxide, the same oxidizing agent Thénard discovered. The hydrogen peroxide attacks mold at the cellular level. Each molecule releases reactive oxygen species that rupture fungal cell walls. This is not a chemical that repels mold or masks it. It annihilates the organism on contact. Liquid bleach, sodium hypochlorite, is ionic. Its structure prevents penetration of porous materials like drywall, wood, and grout. Spray bleach on mold. Surface mold dies, roots survive. The water in bleach actually feeds surviving mycelium. Within weeks, mold grows back. Spray again. Repeat. Call a professional. Hydrogen peroxide is non-ionic. It penetrates porous substrates and reaches hidden mycelium. Studies in the Journal of Environmental Health confirm peroxide-based solutions kill mold in porous materials more effectively than bleach. Sodium carbonate raises surface pH to WAPSIS 11. Mold requires a slightly acidic to neutral environment. The elevated pH lasts weeks to months, creating a barrier without reapplication. The Environmental Protection Agency states mold contamination under 10 square feet can be handled by homeowners. That covers the vast majority of household cases. Sodium percarbonate qualifies. If you've read this far, you know more than 99% of homeowners. Share this before someone writes a $5,000 check because a man in a hazmat suit said their wall is a biohazard. Everything the remediation industry buried is in the complete vault. The U.S. mold remediation industry generates over $6 billion annually. Average professional remediation costs $1,500 to $9,000. Crawl spaces, $6,000 to $10,000. Whole house, over $30,000. Mold inspections alone, $300 to $700. Here's what that money buys. A crew arrives, sets up containment, runs negative air machines with HEPA filters, sprays antimicrobial solutions, usually hydrogen peroxide based, the same chemistry you can create yourself, for $2. They wipe, dry, test, and hand an invoice that dwarfs your mortgage. Labor, under 4 hours. Material markup, over 1,000%. Why doesn't a contractor recommend you DIY with sodium percarbonate? Because it generates zero revenue, no inspection fees, no containment setup, no equipment markups. You cannot patent it. It's public domain. You cannot charge $5,000 for something sold next to laundry detergent. The system runs on one emotion, fear. Fear that mold is toxic, that touching it is dangerous, that improper removal spreads contamination. A calm homeowner armed with a $2 powder is the existential threat to that business model. That is by design. Be honest, sodium percarbonate is not the answer for every mold situation. Large infestations, HVAC contamination, post-flood growth, or immune-compromised households require professionals. Containment and air filtration are necessary for large-scale remediation. But most residential mold, bathroom ceilings, basement walls, window casings, grout lines, is small surface growth. The EPA explicitly allows homeowners to handle it. And the $2 powder outperforms bleach because it reaches the root. Here's what to do. Buy sodium percarbonate, sold as oxygen bleach, OxyClean versatile stain remover, or pure sodium percarbonate powder. A 2 to 3 pound bag costs $5 to $12 and lasts dozens of applications. Put on gloves and safety glasses. Ventilate the room. Dissolve 4 tablespoons in 1 quart of warm water. Stir until dissolved. The fizz is hydrogen peroxide being released. Apply with a stiff brush or sponge to all visible mold. Scrub into grout lines, textured surfaces, and corners. For porous surfaces like unpainted drywall or wood, let the solution sit for 30 minutes. Wipe the surface clean. The discoloration is gone, not masked. The mold's cellular structure is oxidized into nothing. Allow to dry completely. The sodium carbonate residue forms an alkaline defense against new spores. Do not remove it. For extra protection, apply a second light coat and let air dry. Address moisture. Mold cannot grow without water. Fix leaks, improve airflow, run a dehumidifier if humidity exceeds 60%. A $20 humidity meter tells you all you need to know. Within 48 hours, your wall is clean, protected, and inhospitable to regrowth. Total cost, under $25, including minor repairs. Total time, under 30 minutes. A homeowner in Florida was quoted $8,200 to treat 12 square feet of mold. She used sodium percarbonate, fixed the leaking pipe for $14, and never saw mold return. The remediation company never mentioned oxygen bleach or hydrogen peroxide, only containment, air scrubbers, testing, and liability. That silence was deliberate. This knowledge never disappeared. It sat on store shelves, waiting. Thanar discovered it in 1818. Molinari crystallized it in 1899. Every 20th century homemaker knew it. The mold didn't change. The powder didn't change. Only who profits from fear changed. If this opened your eyes, subscribe and share. Every like and share bypasses the algorithm that hides cheap solutions and promotes expensive fear. The complete vault with techniques, ratios, and surface-specific guides is in the description. The next vault is coming, and it's even heavier.